You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. There's been a lot of discussion dealing with Black Voters Matter in terms of where they are, their future, what they're involved in, and there are a lot of folks now who are not particularly happy with the direction of Black Voters Matter. Patrice Cullors, we had her on the show. We had her on talking about the amount of money, the donations they have been receiving, as well as their leadership. And we've seen a lot of different stories now being done where folks are saying what is happening. There are chapters that are upset with the direction of Black Lives Matter. That's what has been going on as well. The Economist, a story came out today. We have another story that came out in USA Today, and there have been others as well where chapters say they're not getting the resources that they should be getting. That all this money is coming in, but they're not actually helping folks who are on the ground. And so we want to focus on that right now with the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Oklahoma, Reverend Sherri Dickerson, and Chanelle Heim. She's an organizer for Black Lives Matter in Louisville, Kentucky. And so glad to have both of you. Chanelle, I want to start with you. Just your assess. First of all, let's do it this way. Is because here's what people don't realize. There are Black Lives Matter chapters that are not affiliated with the Black Lives Matter Global Network. So your Louisville, Kentucky chapter, are you affiliated with the national entity?
At this time, we are not affiliated with the national entity. And I think for us, it became very confusing this summer. And within the last year of a lot of moving around, and there wasn't a lot of answers. And so with us not being clear on what the solutions or getting any answers, we stayed away from whatever the configuration was. We're still a bit confused on what that configuration is. We just know, just like any of the other sectors that we throw down with from around the country, that whatever is going on at this new entity, I do want to make sure that people understand that this is a brand new entity. This is not the historic entity that folks have been trying to, kind of whitewash with the alt-right stuff that's going on. This is a brand new entity, and so none of us were consulted on that. And it's just been hard to support that. But it also has been feeling a bit neglected as we go through these uprising moments, and Louisville being one of those places, and not getting any support whatsoever.
So let me hold on. I want to go back to what you just said there. And folks, if I can get a little bit more audio with her, because I can barely hear. Here's what you said. It's a new entity. So here's, I think, part of the deal here that is tough for people, that's confusing as well. And that is really understanding what the structure is. And I'll be honest with you, when I had Patrice on the show, I was confused as all get out, because it was the movement for Black Lives, and then it was the Black Lives Matter Global Network. And so when you say this new entity, she named herself as executive director, right? So, and again, here's the other question. If your organization isn't a part of the national group of Black Lives Matter, why do you care?
I think it's a bit dangerous, right?
I'm just trying to understand.
Can you hear me?
Say it again.
I said, yeah. I think it's a bit dangerous in this moment where we have another large protest moment, something very new, not only to the U.S., but to the world, with everybody yelling Black Lives Matter. And in the middle of that, people who we organize with, I think people thought of us as like one big organization, and we're actually very much networked to each other. If DC asks for something, Louisville might answer. If Louisville answers something, Chicago might answer. And that's how we work. What happened was that we decided to make sure that we had a hub that could take care of those resources or anything else and be able to spread it out to the chapters. And little by little, less answers came to that formation. And what was scary for our chapter is that we had an uprising going on, and those things were being asked of us on the ground. We had no idea what people were talking about. until all of a sudden a new formation was made, and several other chapters that we organized with were left out of that as well. And us staying away from that was a clear indication to keep us safe, but also it's just really confusing not to have the representation of what you began this chapter underneath. We got approval from Black Lives Matter, the network, when it was before this iteration of whatever this is, to be able to use the banner and be able to organize within a network of other chapters. So I think that's why it matters a bit, especially as we talk about what decentralization looks like. We've always had to take care of our research.
Okay, so this is...
This new formation is a bit weird because it's changing the narrative of where we begin.
Okay, so this is why I'm absolutely confused, and I want to bring in Reverend Sherri Dickerson here. So, for Reverend Sherri Dickerson, let me ask you: you're there in Oklahoma, okay? Are y'all a part of the Black Lives Matter global network, or the movement for Black Lives, or are you an independent chapter?
Yes, we are part of the movement for Black Lives, which is a different collective that is not the same as the Black Lives Global Network. We were recognized at one time, but we are not an affiliate at this time because they have restructured.
Okay, so let me. Here's the problem. Here's one second. Here's the problem that I have, Sherri and Chanelle. First of all, let's take this thing back. When Black Lives Matter started off as a hashtag, and that thing reverberated around. It really encapsulated all of this energy that we saw out here. Then that thing reverberated all around the country. The problem is, what they did, they tried to actually then go get the trademark, but then it was too late. It had already been out in the public domain. And so essentially what they tried to do is to bring some order to something that took off in reverse. And for me, and I'm just being honest with y'all, that the struggle is even understanding what's what. So even, like I said, when I had Patrice on the show, she was explaining it, and I was kind of like, well, what's this, and what's this, and what's this, and what's this? And so now when you say there's another entity, so what are we now talking about? A third entity? So Chanelle, is it, Again, and trust me, I ain't got no dog in any of this. I'm just actually confused because there's the Black Lives Matter Global Network, there's the Movement for Black Lives, and what you're saying, Chanelle, is now there's a third entity, correct?
Correct. But it has been a part of that same formation that has just been coming and coming and coming. Confusing for you, confusing for chapters who organize within that structure, right? So we organize with those folks, and there's decisions that are being made, and we're not even talking about small decisions, right? There's this whole conversation of sending Biden a letter, and even the support that we see during this global rebellion for our chapters and what's happening. And that conversation is not happening with anybody. There's certain delegations that are being made for other chapters. And it's just been confusing. And I think for those chapters that actually penned that letter and want that accountability, it's just been had for a few years, and we just not have gotten any answers whatsoever. I think it's really surprising that he was trying to come to the show instead of actually trying to come to us to explain like what is actually happening and what's going on. I'm supportive of like folks who look at accountability, but I wanted to clarify this is part of this will be a seriously for the movie.
So Sherri, the thing is, and this is really, here's the thing for me, Sherri, that is fascinating and frustrating. There was so much discussion among Black Lives Matter activists. Well, no, we didn't want like the Urban League and the NAACP and like everybody else. We wanted decentralized, no one leader. We wanted collective decision making. I'll be honest with you, Sherri. Nothing can run that way. I'm just being perfectly honest. Part of the deal here, you cannot have a national entity having chapters if you don't have something, a document that holds them together. It's the Constitution, it's bylaws, it's operating procedures, it's hierarchy, it's structure. National CEO, boards, regional leaders, state leaders. And so I just really believe that at the end of the day, the reason we're at this point is because this idea of trying to create this decentralized, yet national, yet international infrastructure is just impossible to do unless you actually put real infrastructure and hierarchy in place. Your response?
I don't.
Sherri? Chanelle, 1 second. Chanelle, hold on. Chanelle, hold on. Reverend, go ahead.
Yeah, Roland, I do not disagree with you as far as how organizations and the necessary structure for them to function. And I don't want it to seem that, especially, and I can speak for the Oklahoma City chapter and many of the BLM 10 that signed on to the letter, this was not an issue of being upset. This is calling for accountability and transparency because that is part of liberation work. We want to have a cohesive flow amongst all of us. And we don't want anyone excluded. When there's a chapter that is doing the work and they are working around police brutality, when they are serving mutual aid, that's part of the Black Lives Matter platform. And so it's not problematic at what they're trying to do, except for it has been exclusionary, except for there has been no communication with those of us on the front lines doing the work. And they've said that
and that's, and first of all, let me do this here.
Or invitation, but that has not occurred for everyone. And so it needs to be equitable.
Oh, so let's do this here. Chanelle, I can barely hear you. Your sound is muffled. Control room, if y'all can make her audio only, that'll be great. If we can do audio only via Skype or FaceTime, that'll be much better because the people even on YouTube and Facebook, they literally cannot hear you, and I can't understand. It sounds real muffled, so let's get that fixed. I want to bring in Robert and Scott here. Robert, you're part of Rainbow Push. You have chapters. You have hierarchy, your organization. I think what Black Lives Matter is going through those real life growing pains on how do you harness something that no one expected will just take off the way it did. That's first. But two, Robert, let's be honest. This is also because millions of dollars have been coming in to Black Lives Matter, just like the NAACP has gotten millions of dollars of support after the death of George Floyd. What the difference is, you have infrastructure, national chapters, all these things put in place, and Black Lives Matter is trying to put all this stuff together. And the criticism, I think, of people is legitimate when they say, hey, you make yourself the leader, which goes to, well, how did you do that? Was there an election? Did a board choose you? Was there a vote of the membership? Do you even have membership? And then also part of it's a branding deal. It's crazy to say that you have some chapters, that you have Black Lives Matter chapters that aren't a part of an entity which goes to the whole deal of the trademark. Guess what? The national entity can't say you can't use our name because they can't trademark the name. So it's to me, and I get they want to use Black Lives Matter, but at the end of the day, this is one of those things where I think folks may have to just simply pull back and say, let's shut this thing down. Let's completely have a clear organizational chart and then we're bringing folks in to know what the hell is going on. So I get really all sides. It's just, Robert, confusing as hell.
Well, look, Roland, I think one of the best pieces of advice my Aunt Catherine gave me is that experience is the best education. Someone else's experience is the cheapest education. These are the regular growing pains of any organization. If you look back to the Big Six in the 1960s or the progeny of the Civil Rights Movement going back a century, you have many of these same issues and similar issues. If you look at any sorts of social justice organizations, and this is where intergenerational dialogue comes in. Because if you are able to have conversations between a group like the Rainbow Push Coalition or the SCLC, Georgia Coalition of the People's Agenda, NAACP, with some of these younger organizations, and then find out what they did as they grew. How do you create a structure? There was not always a situation where Rainbow Push had offices in Detroit, Chicago, Silicon Valley, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. You have to learn how to build that organization. Being a revolutionary is easy. Governing is harder. So as we grow, as we continue to focus on the work and focus on the mission, you build the infrastructure around that to make it a long-lasting concept, a long-lasting idea that can build for generations to come and execute the plan, and not simply be a here today, gone tomorrow group. And also, when you don't have that organizational structure in place, you end up with a situation like Sir Major in Atlanta, who was representing himself as being part of Black Lives Matter, but was actually Black Lives Matter of Metro Atlanta or whatever organization he created, and then used thousands of dollars in donations to buy cars, to buy a house, those sorts of things. So these things come together over time. And I think instead of chastising, it's a situation where older and established organizations can work together with these groups. And of course, to anybody involved in these organizations, they can reach out to me at any time. I'd be glad to speak with them and find out the best ways to go forward, because as long as the mission is the focus, then you can work on developing the infrastructure around that. But it's all about dialogue between groups so you can figure out what other people did to build their organizations as strong. None of these things happen overnight.
You're a lawyer. You're used to organizations and lawsuits and all kind of stuff along those lines. Any lawyer will tell you, if this sucker ain't organized and you ain't got all your ducks lined up in a row, you're going to have dissension in the ranks.
Well, Roland, are you talking to me? It's A. Scott.
Yeah, go ahead. No, it's you, Scott.
Here's the difference between the Big Six when they were organized. They were organization. The Black Lives Matter movement started as a movement, if you will. And you're absolutely right. The movement, because there was so much work to be done around the country, that no one was thinking about organization, trademark, and what have you. And then the thousands, if not millions of dollars started rolling in. And now you have no trademark, and so you have these various independent entities operating, and that's what it's going to be. So either one or two things are going to happen. One, whoever has the most credibility and is best organized, it's every man for himself. They're going to raise the money and assert themselves and present and be present and fight. All the other organizations are free to do the same thing right now. Secondly, if there's some organizing force or some presence or person that can bring all of these factions, all of these entities together and create an organization through acceptance and people signing off on exactly what the structure would be, because you're going to need structure because to have these chapters, if you will. I represent probably 7 or 8 Black nonprofits, and while they're organizations, excuse me, none of them started as a movement. And so this is the challenge. It's not just growing pains, it's organizing pains, if you will, and it's going to be up to the will of those who deeply believe in the movement, whether they're founders or not, to try to get one organization, accept leadership structure and the ability to lead. And that's what you're left with, or you're just going to have factions all around the country doing their thing.
I want to bring back Sherri and Chanelle. I think we got Chanelle's audio straight. Chanelle, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, so Chanelle, I can hear you. So Chanelle, okay, what do you want to see done moving forward with this national entity, third group, whatever? What do you want to see happen with Black Lives Matter?
That's what I was going to say earlier. I think sometimes people think decentralization means deorganization, and that's not true. We have plenty of organization. I mean, most of us have been managers of like large companies and stuff. That's not the problem. Our problem is the communication, the transparency that we've been asking for years. This didn't just start this year or last year. This started many years ago. And so, as you name off other organizations who may have gone through the same thing or whatnot, we are not alone at asking for that transparency, but having that transparency actually be answered. So I think for the chapters, it's understanding what took place and then how did we get here? Because those are the questions that we're asking.
Sherri, Reverend Dickerson, isn't this also, first of all, I want to see what you want, but isn't this also a matter of the millions that have come in and chapters are going, wait a minute, we're the ones doing all the work. How is that money also funneling down to us? How's it being distributed to us? Sherri?
I think she's got mic issues.
Can you hear me now?
Sherri, please unmute.
I'm unmuted.
Now we can hear you.
Are
Go
you
ahead.
able to hear me? Okay. So I do
now
agree
we can hear you.
that we need, like we said, structure. What I want, the first thing that I would want is that the issues that we advocate against and try to get the systems dismantled, that we would be successful at that. So there would be no more issues to where people are dying by the violence of state-sanctioned violence and police brutality. Here in Oklahoma City, we are currently dealing with a situation where we've had 4 deaths within the last month. One just happened on Friday. A mentally ill man was murdered by Oklahoma City police. So what I want is for that to stop happening. With the organization, I want continuity. Yes, do we want shared resources? Do we want shared power? Do we want to have organizational structure where we are able to support one another and have support from the power hierarchy? Of course we do. It is difficult. The gentleman that spoke that said it's easy to be a revolutionary. I disagree with that. This is not an easy work. It is a heavy work. But with the revolution and being part of the movement, it does take finances to be able to ask people to literally step up and do this work, to stand on the front lines, to help us run administration, to have those voices amplified, to have someone have a social media presence, to be able to offer resources to the families that are dealing with the loss of a loved one. I mean, in the world of COVID, we want to be able to be the resource for our communities. That is what I want. That is why we are saying that we need just basically, it's not a part of the pie. If you are collecting, there are a lot of people who have donated under the misunderstanding that the money is distributed to the chapters where they are, and that's not happening. I want that to begin to happen.
Well, perfect example. I mean, that was this group that created some Black Lives Matter entity out of San Francisco that wasn't tied to the actual Black Lives Matter group. And I think a company gave, several $1 million, and they had to ask for the money back. I mean, to me, this is real basic. It's like, look, I'm vice president digital for the National Association of Black Journalists. If you want to support NABJ, you go to nabj.org. There's one entity. And I'll just be honest with both of you. This is the final comment here for me, Sherri and Chanelle, and I want to get your final comments as well. If a guy like me is confused as hell, I can guarantee you there are millions of people out there confused. Folk don't know where to send money, who to send it to. When Donald Trump and Republicans were complaining about Black Lives Matter Minneapolis with this chant, pigs in a blanket, they said, that's Black Lives Matter. That chapter wasn't even affiliated with the national group. And so the difficult thing, look, I'm also an alpha. If you guys a bunch of guys running around saying, wearing black and gold and saying we're alphas, and they were not actually an alpha chapter, we shut that down. And so to me, this is just something where, again, from a national standpoint, and I keep hearing, when someone tells me we have structure, I'll be honest with you, when there are three entities bouncing around and you're not really know who's what and who's doing what, I think it's confusing. It's confusing to the public, not knowing if you're a chapter or you're not, or you're certified or you're not. What's the certification? Who chose leadership? To me, all of that goes together, Chanelle, and I just think for the public, it's utterly confusing, and it would behoove Patrice and others to say, we have got to get this thing ironed out so we can have a path forward. Otherwise, people are going to lose confidence in Black Lives Matter, and that is the worst thing that can happen if it ends up going there, Chanelle.
I think when people are actually invested into something, when they actually want to see that change, here we're talking about revolutionary chapters of people who take up Black liberation work. They know exactly where that work comes from. There's really not confusion about who does the work and who doesn't do the work. What I do find confusing is when I see a link on a popular branded website and I'm wondering where the money goes to. When we send the links out from our chapters or from our work, particular pieces of our work, whether it's housing Black mothers or feeding people out in the streets, they know exactly where that work is going to. So I don't want to make that confusion. What I do want to make confusion is when we're talking about transparency and accountability. That can happen anywhere. We got an entire president who isn't transparent and accountable to anybody. So I want to make sure that we're talking about the right things when we're talking about this situation. The tension is not within the organization. The tension is with the chapters who are producing the work, and an entity who is collecting resources, not only funds, but resources for that work. And those chapters, including the ones from the South or wherever they are, and people who used to be those chapters, have the right to be able to name that as we fight revolutionarily for freedom and to dismantle the systems, like Sherri said, that are killing Black people on the streets. They know exactly who those people are. Now, the problem we do have is people believe in the narratives that do come from the alt-right, the Republicans, or Trump's mouth. I'm not too concerned with them, but I think we do have a problem when we don't defeat that piece, right? I don't care what they're saying. What I do care is about what my people say and the work that my people see. And so that's where I'm more concerned about. All I'm asking for is transparency and communication, a call, an email, or something.
Sherri, final comment.
My final comment is that could we use a situation? I would love it if Ms. Collier's, and I have respect and I understand how organizations or a movement kind of just blossoms into something we weren't expected. I'm also affiliated with the Women's March, which we're dealing with some of the exact same growing pains. We would love to sit down at the table, be recognized for the work that we are doing, and get on the same page. They did ask us to have a fiscal sponsor, to get your boards together, and many of us complied with everything that they asked, and yet we have still had no communication. They have not acknowledged many of the chapters that are doing that work.
Well, look, we lost Reverend Sherri Dickerson. I appreciate her joining us. She is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter in Oklahoma, and also Chanelle Heim, Black Lives Matter, Louisville, Kentucky. I certainly appreciate both of you being with us. Folks, Robert, final comment here. Look, I appreciate what both of them want. I think, Robert, this also comes down to money. I think people, and look, when I had Patrice on, I want to know how much money has come in. You know, I know, look, the NAACP, when I had Derek Johnson on, look, they've had more than $70 million come their way in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd. Folks want to know, how's that money going to be spent? The same question people are asking, and guess what? There should be an accounting of that. They should be able to, Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors and her team should be able to issue a report stating how much money has been pledged to Black Lives Matter in the wake of George Floyd's death, how much money has been received, where is that money going? It is going into what area of grants? How many people are on staff? What are people getting paid? So when people talk about transparency, you're right. If you have chapters and you have a process, look, there should be a process there, meaning a chapter is notified 30 days or 60 days after. All those things. You have to put the infrastructure pieces in place before you can truly have an effective organization. Folks, a movement is not an organization. And that is the difference I think we're seeing right here, Robert.
Well, that was my point about being revolutionary is a lot easier than governing. You know, we all have had revolutionary ideas. When I was in college, I decided I was going to organize our campus workers at Clark-Atlanta University, and I was going to do all these protests. And I almost got my ass expelled. Reverend Jackson's the one who saved me to make sure I was able to graduate, because having organizational support is very important. So instead of trying to out-revolutionary each other and out-revolutionary everybody, work on putting those infrastructural bedfast in place, and understand that there's nothing wrong with reaching out to other organizations. People who have been around for 40 and 50 years have been around for 40 and 50 years for a reason, because they understand taxes, because they understand payroll and OSHA regulations, and finding out how to build it into an actual movement instead of simply a revolutionary idea. So it's important to have those conversations, to reach out to people. You don't have to reinvent the entire wheel. And you talking about the millions of dollars these organizations are raising, give some of that money to Rainbow Push. Reverend Jackson asks me every day to raise money. Go to rainbowpush.org, join, get a membership, because there are organizations, there are legacy organizations that have been around, that are still doing the revolutionary work, and understand that there are plenty of fights for us all to have a different part in the fight. If we're fighting each other, that's another moment, another minute, another dollar that we're not spending on the work that needs to actually be done.
Folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.